So, as I said in my article on randpaulreview.substack.com, there's many positive reasons to support the Senator and Dr. Rand Paul, who is the son of the great and magnificent Ron Paul. Here we have a little video from Russell Brand, the hilarious comedian, much funnier than me, where he's talking to Rand Paul. And we're going to cover some issues to show that Rand Paul should be the future of the GOP. If only he was a bit taller. I think that he gets too much crap for that. But beyond that, in the terms of how he actually thinks, he seems to be on the right side of every issue. And I should know because I've had a Rand Paul related website for quite a number of years.
Rand Paul, we're only going to be on YouTube for a moment, so get over onto Rumble. There's a link in the description and join us there. Here's Senator Rand Paul for our conversation. Senator Rand Paul, thank you so much for joining me today on Stay Free with Russell Brand.
Glad to be with you. I hear it's a really big program to be on, so everybody wants to get on your show.
It is a
So, number one reason to support Rand Paul, he's clearly quite polite.
significant cultural artifact. We regularly have outspoken members of a worldwide resistance movement, of which you have become a significant voice. And now with your book, Deception, in over 500 pages, you have articulated what many people have felt, in fact, due in no small part to your own investigations since the outset of the pandemic, that we've been subject to an unprecedented global deceit, and that Anthony Fauci plays a central and key role in orchestrating this deceit. What primarily is it that you want us to understand from this book about Anthony Fauci's role in the pandemic and its cover-up?
I think we've never had a cover-up where the proof of the cover-up and the proof of the deceit, the proof of the lying is so obvious in the words of the people committing the cover-up. So we had Anthony Fauci and all these virologists.
I don't think he mentions this, but also the guy from the WEF wrote his book about called COVID-19, The Great Reset. So they're being quite straightforward about the fact that they don't think we should have any level of freedom, right? They want their 15-minute cities where they can control our meat consumption and how much we pollute the atmosphere. They don't want us driving cars at all. They want it more like in communist China, where you lose social credit points for jaywalking. It's ridiculous.
Publicly saying you're crazy if you think this came from the lab. It absolutely came from animals. But you have them in private explicitly saying the opposite, not just hedging their bet, but absolutely saying, wow, this is no conspiracy theory. This looks like the most likely thing. Some of these scientists were saying, I'm 64.
Listen to that. All the scientists knew from the beginning. Now, maybe not everyone, but the significant ones in government knew that the COVID vaccine, or not the vaccine, the COVID, problem may have come from the Wuhan Institute, or did come from the Wuhan Institute and nothing else.
40, it came from the lab, or I'm 80-20, or I'm 50-50. But in public, they were saying absolutely no way it came from the lab. So it was a dishonesty on a level that we've never ever been able to prove by actually seeing in their own words how diabolically dishonest they were.
How very Orwellian is that? Or disgustingly Orwellian. They're telling us one thing while they believe something completely different. I guess we shouldn't expect any less from worthless bureaucrats. All right, here's another video from a Trump supporter who is advocating for Rand Paul being the future leader of the GOP in the Senate. And I definitely think that that needs to happen.
All right, everyone, we start off today with a mild suggestion. Since Mitch McConnell is no longer going to be the Senate GOP leader, he's stepping down in November. He's decided that he's going to remain in the Senate, but he's not going to be the Senate leader for the Republican Party. My suggestion is quite simple. Can we please get Rand Paul in there as the Senate majority/minority leader? Probably the majority after the election. I think that would be a good idea. Let me put forth my proposal. Rand Paul, number one, is from the same state as Mitch McConnell. So Kentucky voters really should be pressuring that to be a thing. Because he's outgoing and Rand Paul is not, it would make sense to pass the torch to somebody from your own state, right? Kentucky voters should love the premise because you continue to have the Senate majority and or minority leader from your state. So for you, extra important. If you're in Kentucky, right into Rand Paul's office, right into Mitch McConnell's office, and say, look, this should be a thing. It might be a little bit of political nepotism on the state level, but I don't give a damn. Number two, Rand Paul, by Senate standards, is relatively young. He could hold that position for 3 or 4 terms with ease. As we've seen, most of the Senate is geriatric. Rand Paul is a Gen Xer. Is I mean, he's not young anymore, but he's not elderly or something like that. So he's got that vigor. He's got the relative youth, and he's also got the stage presence. One thing I've noted about Rand Paul, he's capable of being very procedural and very dry and sort of in with the political thing. He knows how to do that, but he's also a meme lord. He does the Festivus thing every single year and sometimes does random live streams. And there was that one live stream he did years ago, and it wasn't working out like technically, like it kept dropping or something. And he's like, at the end, he's like, fuck it, and he just ends the live stream. He can be unintentionally hilarious too. Person with a good sense of humor.
Rand Paul is actually quite funny. I used to have a Rand Paul Facebook page with a few 100,000 fans before they lowered our reach horribly and so on. And I got calls from his people telling me that Rand Paul and his son thought that my stuff was hilarious. A lot of my, I just posted ridiculous internet memes and stuff like that. But occasionally I'd say something that was funny myself. But Rand and Ron Paul are definitely well known for their sense of humor.
One of the few people in Congress that we can genuinely count on to support liberty. A marginal.
Those are few and far between, right? There aren't that many politicians that actually support liberty. I like Thomas Massey. It's too bad Justin Amash left, but I understand his effort to his decision to retire.
Small L libertarian. You could not do better than to have Rand Paul in there. Now, some of you will say, well, I want Rand Paul as the running mate for Donald Trump. Trust me, I am very sympathetic to your plea. I would love to see Rand Paul be Donald Trump's running mate. It would be a dream ticket. I would be on my deathbed and I would have them carry my fucking half-dead body into the voting booth to vote for them. It would be great. It's a dream come true if that happens, but it won't happen. Rand Paul does not seem to be seriously considered as a running mate option. It's again probably going to be an unassuming male or a charismatic female, and Rand Paul is a charismatic male. He has a large group of people that really, really like him. He's very well spoken, and he has quite a stage presence. He's not the sort of person that you would think of as being a likely running mate for Donald Trump. He's also probably not willing to take the position. He likes the fact that he's in that senior role within the Senate. So get him in as the leader of the GOP in the Senate. And by the way, we can clean house too. Imagine this. We go forth into the 24 election. Mitch McConnell, of course, is no longer Senate leader. Imagine Trump gets reelected. Rand Paul, by the way, the first person to drop out in 2016 and endorse him that had any pull at all. He gets in as Senate leader, and then you get a new House leader who is MAGA as well. Maybe it's a Gates or a Boebert or somebody like that. Would that not be helpful going forward to promoting populism in the United States and sort of washing away the dross that is neoconservatism?
Seriously, let's get rid of the neocons. We don't need to be in perpetual warfare. I think part of this is why Gen Z is moving more right wing, but moderately to right wing, not towards the neocons or the progressives, because their entire life, if you are in your early 20s right now, your entire life we've been in Afghanistan and Iraq and are now going right into Ukraine. Why would anyone want to support that? It's ridiculous. So, if you like Trump, you should definitely support Rand Paul. It would be better for this nation to have him be head of the Senate. I can't imagine that would actually happen, but with guys like Mitch McConnell and Pelosi aging out, maybe it'll finally happen.
I think that would be very, very helpful. And Rand Paul has been very, very effective. Look at the NSA spying scandal. This is under Obama. What did Rand Paul do? He organized a filibuster to stop the NSA spying from being renewed.
That was huge for my for my old website, randpaulreview.com, which I own the domain again now. But that was really huge, a really big deal. I remember watching that And my Facebook page and the website just blew up during that time. I was selling T-shirts that said "Don't drone me, bro," and I sold a few hundred of them. And that was good times. I had high hopes back then when Ron Paul was running for president back in those days, and then BLM and Antifa happened. But I think things are looking up again for the next few years.
If it wasn't for Ted Cruz cucking at the last moment, Rand Paul would have held the line. And he did, and he was frustrated by that. He was pissed at Ted Cruz. You could see it in his face. He's a man of principle. There are very few men of principle in Congress. It's very difficult to get into the halls of D.C. at any level. Goddamn, even if you're a fucking janitor, if you have any real, honest principles. Rand Paul is one of the few politicians, I think, in U.S. politics in modern history that actually genuinely believes in trying to do what's right. He's not always successful. He's not always on cue, but he does a good job. I think he should be the one running the Senate Republicans. And
I firmly agree with that, and it's really disappointing to see these people comment on Facebook advocating for violence against him, including popular celebrities. He could launch a million lawsuits against people in this country for advocating for violence against him. Right, his neighbor attacked him from behind, and he ended up in the hospital. Even if you're a really good fighter, if someone attacks you from behind, it's not really a way that you can defend yourself there because it's unexpected. And so that's pretty disappointing. But Rand Paul does a lot of good things for other people. He goes to third world countries when the Senate is not in session, gives people free eye exams and even eye surgery. So I think that's pretty cool.
with him at the helm instead of Mitch McConnell or some other neocon bitch, I think that you would win a lot more races than you are right now. For instance, I don't think that Rand Paul would have wasted $10 million in a GOP versus GOP race in Alaska like Mitch McConnell did. Throwing the money to Lisa Murkowski because that Shabaka there is bad news.
Mitch McConnell spent an entire career building bridges to nowhere. He's a completely useless person, and he's now the longest running senator in history, which is just that much of a sign that we need term limits. So I seriously hope that in the next few years we have a contingent of people who fully support that. In my opinion, you shouldn't be able to spend more than 12 years in the Senate and the House each, probably, and definitely not more than 18 years. I would think 2 terms in the Senate, 6 terms in the House. That's plenty. 12 years, a little longer than the president. You got enough turnover that new people are coming in, learning the ropes while other people are running things. It would be fine.
That was a little bit of a strategic mistake now, wasn't it? A little bit too on the nose. I think that it was on purpose. Mitch McConnell threw that race deliberately, and in the process screwed Herschel Walker, possibly Mehmet Oz, although with Fetterman it's like, yeah, well, at least he's entertaining, and Mehmet Oz wasn't necessarily the greatest candidate. Blake Masters, other people like that, he could have gotten them all in. In the end, the Senate candidates that were MAGA, most of them failed, not because they were weak candidates, which is the going line, but because they were denied support by the party itself, by the RNC number 1, and by Mitch McConnell as Senate leader number 2.
Unfortunately, this is happening at lower levels as well. Like the people who like Moms for Liberty and these people who are against DEI, the conservatives who still read mainstream media are just not with it. And hopefully things will begin to improve over the next few years because a lot of what other people have been saying is just turning out to be true. So I think that will continue going forward.
Number 2, Rand Paul, I don't think would make that mistake. He is a small R Republican in the sense that he does not always ideologically align with the main line of his party. And that's important. That negotiation, that ability to actually defy the neocon line is exactly why you would want him in such a position. So if Rand Paul cannot be Donald Trump's running mate, I want him to lead the Senate Republicans. By the way, while I will never register as a Republican, if the GOP does choose him, or somebody comparable to him, I will accept no substitutions. I want fucking Rand Paul. I don't want somebody similar to him. I want him, the man himself. Ron Paul's son? Yeah, I don't think you're going to do better than that. If they do choose him, and he does become the leader of the GOP in the Senate, that will really redeem the party in my eyes. And considering the fact that he's relatively young and obviously fairly fit, Again, you could be looking at a dynastic sort of situation where the GOP has improved for decades to come. Well, it won't be just be a morning in America again. The GOP will finally see the light of dawn. Well, it hasn't for a long time. Rand Paul for GOP Senate leader or bust. I supported him
Hell
for his
yeah.
presidential run in 2016 until he dropped out and endorsed Trump, and that was the flipping point for me, at which point I said, okay, if Rand Paul thinks that the dude will do a good job, that's enough for me because I trust his judgment. I genuinely believe that he actually cares. I can't say that about the average politician. It's that is a very very large step for somebody like me who is government skeptic in general. I'm a classical liberal, of course. I'm more libertarian than Rand Paul on most of the issues, but I would trust him in that role to at least try to do what's right. You can't do any better than that. There's nobody else in the Senate GOP that would do a better job than Rand Paul. You'll be crazy if you put somebody else forth. And Mitch McConnell, again, as a fellow Kentuckian, should be openly endorsing him and saying, well, I'm standing down. We got another man from Kentucky that I think will do a good job. For what little the endorsement would be worth, it should still be made anyway. So, yes, Rand Paul 2024, not for running mate.
It would be great if Mitch McConnell chose to support Rand Paul, but I think that he begrudgingly deals with Rand Paul over the years. Mitch McConnell is very corrupt, I think. Not as much as Pelosi, but I don't think he's worth a hill of beans. So he won't support Rand Paul, but Rand Paul recognizes the Republican Party is becoming the party of the working man and not the party of rich elites like the Democrats. The Democrats are all about their billionaire donors like George Soros and burning down cities across the country. From BLM and Antifa are all about destroying federal property, all about destroying state property, all about destroying city property like police stations and county courthouses and things like that, destroying statues, sometimes of people who were civil rights leaders. But that's just how uninformed and stupid your average BLM or Antifa supporter really is. So I think with the Gen Z at the helm, we could be leading into a right wing revolution here. All right, conservative is the new counterculture. So let's go forward with that notion.
Though, for leader of the Senate. Probably the majority, by the way, incoming in 2024, based on the races and the fact that the GOP only has to defend one race for every two that the Dems have to defend. That's about all.
Here we have another great video about Senator Rand Paul saying, we've never sent this much money to any country ever. Isn't that the truth?
Of money that can be sent. 170 billion is getting close to infinite.
$170 billion. And he talks here about how the amount of money can be infinite because the Federal Reserve can print money forever, and which just leads to higher levels of inflation in the long run, which cuts into your purchasing power parity and makes the government want to tax you even more.
Never sent that much money to any country ever. If we go another year, they burn through about 10 billion a month, and they already think they're a couple months behind on that. Within 4 to 6 months, they'll be asking for more money again. But should we at least ask where it's being spent? Sure, some of it's being spent on arms, tanks, guns, this, that. But some of it's going to pay their government salaries. Some of it's going to pay for welfare, disability, health care, first responders. I think we pay the salaries of 57,000 first responders.
Let's remember as well that Mitch McConnell has admitted that a lot of that money that's supposedly sent to Ukraine comes back to the U.S., but it's through government contractors, right? So it's kind of a bribe. It's like an indirect bribe. Send billions of dollars overseas, and then the Ukrainian government uses the money to pay American companies, so that it's kind of like a grift, taking away American taxpayer funds to hire mercenaries abroad.
Do we have enough money to pay for the entire government, another government, plus all of their weapons? In addition to their government, we've been paying their pensions. That embarrassed some of the people, as they said finally, well, we'll pay for everything else. We'll pay for all of your government, but by golly, we draw the line at pensions. So they excluded pensions from this after paying for the pensions for over a year. But billions upon billions are going to pay for their government. Look,
Quite a lot of Americans would like to have a pension, and they don't have one, yet the U.S. government is paying one in, in Ukraine. That's ridiculous. I mean, the Social Security is looking like it's going to be solvent in the next few years as the population shrinks in size. So it's quite disgusting.
most of us over here want a smaller U.S. government. Now they want to ask us to pay for a bloated Ukraine government. But it's worse than just paying for their government and all of their programs. We're giving small business subsidies to Ukraine. If you watched 60 Minutes not too long ago, what you saw was a ladies' bag, ladies' handbags, a business that's getting subsidies from us. Look, I'm not even for subsidizing U.S. businesses. I'm for profit and loss. You sell something good somebody wants to buy, you become successful in business. I don't think we should subsidize American businesses. But now they're not asking me just to subsidize American businesses. They want me to subsidize Ukrainian businesses. I think that's obscene. I think that's absurd. I think when I go home and I ask people, can you believe they're sending money?
Hey, U.S. government, subsidize my business. Come on, what are you doing? You're over there subsidizing Ukrainian businesses, wasting tons of American taxpayer money while they're banning people's ability to attend the church services that they want to attend. It's amazing to me how many progressive on the left and neocons on the right support this sort of nonsense. They make so many justifications for the fact that the Ukrainian government banned elections, right? They're going to get a dictator there in Ukraine. They have one already in Zelensky. And it doesn't look like things are going to improve anytime soon.
Money to a handbag factory, to a handbag shop in Ukraine. People are aghast. They're livid. They're like, who are these people? We'll vote them out. And that's really what should go on. It's part of what this debate is about. People at home need to know who these people are. They're every Democrat save one and about 15 Republicans. People need to pay attention. They need to look how their senator votes on this or how their congressman votes if it gets to the House of Representatives. Because this is about people who are prioritizing Ukraine first and America last. Some of the money that's gone over
Ukraine first and American last. Who exactly cares about that besides Rand Paul, right? Politicians don't care. Mitch McConnell doesn't care. Nancy Pelosi doesn't care. Joe Biden doesn't care. Kamala Harris doesn't care. Most of these politicians couldn't care less about putting America first. It's not even in their wheelhouse. They just make excuses. They just say, "Don't worry about us. We're the more empathetic and fair bureaucrats, so don't question our actions." But actions speak louder than words.
there, in addition to going to small businesses, actually went to send 6 contestants to Paris Fashion Week, to the famous fashion show of Paris. So, in the midst of this war, we're sending money to send some fashion brands or whatever that is from Ukraine to the Paris Fashion Show. In the middle of this war,
If you didn't believe that the war was a bit of a gimmick from the beginning, I think what he just said there, what Senator Paul just said, kind of gives it away. I mean, Zelensky is just their spokesperson, the personal marketing for whatever brand of nonsense the governments are trying to produce. I mean, I think they're on the side of the WEF and a lot of these losers that don't want people to have any level of freedom. This next part from Rand Paul is actually quite good as well. He really puts into words what Americans are thinking, especially about the fact that the working man is moving towards the Republican Party. Democrats are now the party of rich, useless bureaucrats.
Party, what we have here is a failure of these elites to understand that the American people want to put America first. 61% of Americans live from paycheck to paycheck, and they want to put Ukraine first. I want you to talk to your constituents at home, the ones who live paycheck to paycheck, and tell them why you're shipping $60 billion to Ukraine. This will be $170 billion. We have never before in the history of the United States flooded so much money into another country.
To be clear, politicians do not care about your future, right? They do not care, and they probably understand economics to some extent. They know it's going to take away the opportunities of future generations, of your children and of your grandchildren. They're going to piss away your purchasing power. They're going to get rid of your social security. They're going to lose anything in relation to the welfare state. Well, I mean, that way now it's sounding good actually, but they won't be able to afford those things in the future. That's for sure. Unfortunately, they're going to tax you into oblivion before you can take on the advantages of a reduced state, because the government is more interested in spending as much as it can and ruining your ability to improve your life.
61% of our country lives paycheck to paycheck. 8 out of 10 families that make $50,000 or less don't have enough money to pay for their bills in 2 weeks if their check doesn't come. If they have one interruption in their family, one thing that sets them back, one unexpected expense, they don't have enough money to pay their bills, and you want to put Ukraine first. This is why the Democrat Party is losing the working man. This is why the Republicans have become the party of the working class. This is why many, if not most, members of the unions are now looking at Republicans, because we support the working man. We support the working women of America, and we recognize that they do not want to send their hard earned money and taxes halfway across the world.
That's a great point, and it's also why a lot of minorities are leaving the Democrat Party and going to Trump, because he doesn't have the history of racism that the mainstream media has lied about, and they're hoping that he will do what he did in his first term, which was increase the income levels, particularly for African Americans, and largely just by getting out of people's way so they can make their own decisions in life. The government can't decide what's best for you, but it can get out of the way. So,
what does their money go for? Do we know what they're doing with their money in Ukraine? Well, we do know that the money went to fund 6 fashion brands to go to the Paris Fashion Show.
It also didn't go to allowing for elections to happen, because they stopped that. So, although I said that already, but moving on. If you're not that familiar with Rand Paul, this is him getting pretty excited. He's pretty up in arms about the nonsense that's going on. It's just unfortunate we can't get more politicians to support this worldview that we shouldn't be spending ridiculous amounts of money in foreign countries. Here we have this video where Rand Paul is talking about the border crisis and his fight to get America to actually, or the American politicians to actually treat this issue seriously. Now the Democrats have switched gears and are trying to blame it on Republicans. The Al Sharptons and the other as well, the other Democrat shills are pushing the narrative that this is somehow Republicans' fault, which is what Obama did for 8 years. It's weird to me that the Democrats offer zero solutions to any actual problems, yet they still get all this support just because they're not Republicans. The right wing scores higher on orderliness if you've ever taken the Big Five personality test, and they know how things work in real life. The left just doesn't. But here we have Rand Paul talking about the border crisis.
And came out with a bill. I love Chris Murphy's response. Chris Murphy's explaining how great this bill, and he says the border never closes. It's like, really? This is what you're bragging about, this great border bill? The border never closes? And that's the extraordinary thing. It was going to let 5,000 people a day come in, and then we are going to take extraordinary measures on the illegal crossings.
Right.
Or we were going to let them all come through the ports. No matter what number comes through, the ports would never close.
All right, there's so much here. It's so crazy. So basically, you're signing a bill, and well, I know you're not signing it, but they wanted to push through a bill that was going to basically allow 4,000 or 5,000 illegals a day before it triggered anything.
Right.
We know the border's in essence been open already.
Right.
And they combine it with a zillion other things that have nothing to do with.
And
border.
in some ways, this may be worse than the existing law. Under the existing law, it says that the president may allow migrants asylum. He doesn't have to. In fact, we believe the president has the power not to allow. May means you might. It doesn't mean you have to. It doesn't say shall. But now that they're defining the first 4,000 as in this category of may or shall, and then he shall do something after a certain number, it sounds as if they're codifying that the first 4 or 5,000 are, hey, free. You don't have to do
Right.
anything about it. Whereas now we think the law reads that the president may, at the first person that comes in, may stop migrant asylum just because, hey, we're full, we got too many, and we're just not taking any more right now. We think that's what the law says. So this law would actually take a step towards normalizing the first 4 to 5,000. But even the rules after the first 4 or 5,000 a day, which is 1.8 million a year, after 1.8 million a year, the rules aren't very strong. They give the discretion to Mayorkas, who, well, that's right, they're impeaching Mayorkas. They're giving
Right.
the discretion to Mayorkas. Meanwhile, the Biden campaign is cutting the razor wire and removing the cargo containers that are essentially a wall on the border. So that, oh, we're going to trust them. We're going to negotiate with them and trust them to use new power when they're right now using their power to disrupt the border wall.
So when you
It is literally a criminal act for the Biden administration to remove walls between the Mexican and American, the border there. It's just so hard to fathom how anyone could possibly support that. I mean, it's obvious what they're doing, bringing in 7.5 million people, trying to get them to become voters in some cities, which won't happen. Only citizens can vote, but Democrats have been trying to get them to vote. They're just going for every possible effort to do things that are illegal. It's disgusting that they keep trying to remove their political opponents from the ballots. They're deeply afraid that they're going to lose over time, which is pretty ridiculous. I mean, they don't even have to do that. They've had Democrats win numerous elections over the past 20 years, but the demographics might not be in their favor. Apparently, Gen Z is leaning more right wing, which is a little interesting, if not exciting. Hopefully, it lasts.
saw what Texas did and what Greg Abbott did, and obviously the Supreme Court decision 5-4, they can't do anything, but Texas goes ahead and does it. 25, I think 25 Republican governors have signed on to this. DeSantis is sending a National Guard. States' rights guy, like this is kind of what you want to happen, I suppose, right?
Yeah, they really should work in concert. The federal government should be backing them up, but the states do have a role in this. And many people have said all along, yeah, the states, of course, have a role in having a border. See, I think the way this would work and the way this with a strong leader would end in a couple of weeks is everybody would be sent back. You come across the river, they put you in a little boat and take you right back across. It doesn't have to be a trial. You don't deserve to be in the United States for 10 years with a ticket for a court date 10
Right, their
years from
solution
now.
is more.
That is so true. They're not citizens of the United States. They don't have a right to trial. They don't have a right to everything that we have in our Bill of Rights, right? Those don't apply to non-citizens. The people who believe in ridiculous things like world governments might think that those things apply for some reason, but we can just send them right back, and we should send the 7.5 million people that are in this country illegally now. Just in the last 4 years of the Biden administration, over 7 million people. Can't be said loud enough or often enough. This is a serious problem. And these city governments are starting to realize the problem. I really like the fact that Greg Abbott started busing them into these cities that say that they're supposedly there to protect the illegal immigrants when in reality they don't do anything. But that's typical of socialists. Talk about how empathetic you are while doing nothing, while doing nothing to help anyone and just claiming that it's all on rich people to solve these problems. Well, rich people do pay most of the federal government taxes, and the middle class also pays quite a lot of taxes as well. So, if these socialists and progressives are so adamant about paying more taxes, maybe they should do that. Send some money to the Treasury. Send some more money into the IRS. They're fully capable, but they're not really interested in actually helping anyone. They're just interested in looking like they're helping other people.
For judges.
Yeah, yeah, more judges, more camps, and actually more money for sanctuary cities. Everything for Democrats, every compromise with Democrats involves more money.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people shouldn't lose sight of the main part of this bill, which is $60 billion to Ukraine, who just got caught yesterday stealing another $40 million worth of our weapons and reselling them to God knows who. So I'm against the Ukraine aid because I think borrowing the money, spending over this bill would be $115 billion total, 60 billion to Ukraine. That makes us weaker. It weakens our national security to go further in debt.
When you see them put these bills together, I've asked you this before, but since you're one of the few guys who works in the government who actually understands how the government was set up to work in the first place, when you see them combine these things, okay, we're combining 60 billion of Ukraine aid with the border and some other things. Do you try to ever tell people, hey, maybe we could separate these things, vote on one thing at a time?
Yeah, and it's also true on things with immigration. I'm actually not against immigration. I'm actually for
I wanted to ask you
more
that.
lawful immigration, but it would need to be these little narrow bills. Instead, they say, well, yeah, we'll increase employment based or work based visas, but only if you give the 18 million people who are already here the right to vote. And I was like, look, I'm pretty open on this issue. I would give work permits even to those who came here illegally. I'd probably give some work permits, but I'm not giving them the right to vote, and we're not going to make that trade. So we've stayed at a standstill for the 12 years I've been here. No,
Just think about how corrupt the Democrat Party is here. I mean, they're trying to buy votes flat out because they know that the majority of Americans are not liberal. There's far more conservatives in the country than there are liberals, and they get votes from illegal immigrants and other groups by promising them free stuff that they can't actually afford, and they don't really give anybody anything of use. They just waste people's money with corruption and useless bureaucracy. Let's bring in a Rand Paul or a Trump to act like Andre Millet, or is that his name? Millet down in Argentina. I always get his first name wrong, I think. But, eliminating huge aspects of government, eliminating huge amounts of welfare, that would be fantastic.
immigration changes have happened. Even though I think some incremental things could be improved, none of it happens because the Democrats say all or nothing, comprehensive or nothing. And comprehensive for them means all 18 million people here illegally get to vote, and I'm not for that.
What do you think the Democrat?
18 million in total. That's incredible. 18 million people. Well, we at least need to kick out the 7 million that moved here in the past 4 years. They shouldn't be here and we couldn't afford it. They should leave the country and then they can apply for a work visa. Otherwise, I don't think that should happen.
Intentions are here. Like, what do you think Biden or whoever's driving Biden at this point? What do you think the intentions are from all the videos we see at the border, the amount of people flooding?
Everything about immigration is about power politics. It has nothing to do with the individuals. They don't. There's no sort of compassion. If you talk to these people, do you care about the little kids coming across? What might happen to teenage girls coming across? They don't care about that. All they care about is votes. Their whole goal is to take Texas. They've been trying to take Texas for 20 years. The only way they take Texas is let's legalize a couple of million people here illegally and let them vote. The sooner the better. That's why they can't wait till their kids grow up to vote, because their kids actually might like America and start liking American ways,
Right.
become successful, enter the middle class, become rich, and all of a sudden say, "Wow, America's great. I don't want to have Mexico over here. I want to be part of this American dream." But if you let people vote immediately, particularly if millions come across, they come across with their own agenda, and you got to wonder. I mean, you see these people flying into Mexico City from China, well dressed, designer clothes, $1,000 cell phone, snapping selfies of themselves as they come across the border.
Very few women, very few children.
Yeah. And the thing is,
It's very suspicious. And I don't know if all of you saw in the news recently, but thousands of Chinese people were coming across the border as well. Some of those, I hate to say it, but a few of those people could be spies or have other sorts of agendas. They could be from China's version of the CIA or something who are there to fight. So there's a lot of other groups as well that have come through that area illegally, and definitely have incentives that are different from what Americans will want. But a lot of these politicians, as Rand Paul says, are all about power. That's it. It's just power politics, and that's quite disgusting.
is they'll eventually, once they can get normalized, they'll bring in the rest of their family, or are they here for nefarious purposes?
I just want to jump back to your philosophy on immigration, because libertarians tend to be a little bit more pro legal immigration or having more workers here. There seems to be a little divide on the right now between kind of the big tech guys like Elon Musk, David Sachs, who are kind of more into, okay, we should bring some of these people illegally. And now there's this sort of like, I guess the MAGA side of it, which is just shut down the border and figure it out.
There's people lose sight of the fact that about 1 million come a year. That's what comes in, about 1 million legally and lawfully. And if you stop that, if you're a restrictionist and you say we want 500,000 next year, guess what? No houses are going to be built. They do a lot of work in our country, a lot of migrant workers. And I'm also of the opinion of this, and this is where I think attitude makes a difference if the Republican Party is ever going to grow. I think some of the best Americans just got here. I know many first generation Americans. I live in a small town in Kentucky. We have people from Bosnia. We have people from Burma. There's a question of how many is too many, but at the same time, they're good people. They own restaurants. One of the most successful people in our town now is Bosnian and has a trucking company. So they're good people working hard, and we need to value that. If we as Republicans sort of have this, everybody's bad, everybody from foreign lands is evil, which I think is some ways the way Republicans are depicting themselves, I think there is a danger to that. And of the
That's a really good point. I mean, growing up for me, we had more than 100 exchange students stay at the house, some only for a few weeks at a time, obviously, because 100 is quite a lot. And I've traveled to dozens of countries myself, and most people are good people, and most people want to do the right thing. So that's a positive point Senator Paul made amongst all the negativity going around the world these days. But nevertheless, we should be pushing for legal immigration. People who have skills would be more useful in many ways than people who don't have skills.
million, I think we could probably bring in 1.5 million, but I don't want another 500,000 people
Right,
flooding
that-
across the border. I would make it work based. So I have a bill to double the amount of employment based visas. These are employment EB 1 through 5. And 5 I'm a big fan of. It's you've got $1 million, you want to come to the U.S., we take your $1 million and you start a business and hire people and you can come in. Who wouldn't want rich people to come to our country?
That's a great point, to make them work based. But Democrats hate that. They don't care about work. They think that money grows on trees. They are more than willing to have people come here, live off the welfare state, and continue voting for them. Because again, they really care about is power. Nancy Pelosi made tens of millions of dollars being a corrupt loser throughout her tenure. So, anyways, support Rand Paul or bust for GOP leader of the Senate. Let's go.